Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland, and you know what to do. Subscribe, youtube.com/ESVN show. Put on those push notifications and rate us 5 stars everywhere. And I command you to like the stream, and then after you can say hello to the dual headphoned Bradley Alsop. People ask about that, why you wear 2 pairs of headphones. Care to explain it to the audience? Sometimes we'll get an IM or so about that.
I have my headphones on that are going into the soundboard so I can hear the show. But during the show, both for this show and the Majority Report, I am honestly, I'm still like listening to clips or like listening to other, looking for other clips and stuff. So if I want to like hear something to like play on the show that we may have not gotten to prior to the show starting, I'll just like be like kind of doing secondary research while also.
But is it 2 audio streams at once?
No. These are just like nothing's playing right now.
But sometimes it may be. Yeah. At one point it may be.
Like I have this YouTube stream up on mute, and I'll just go back and check stuff sometimes.
Understood.
So
Understood.
I always need the four. I always need the four ear capability. You know?
It's like in case of emergency situation, if you need to check on something technically.
But I found myself doing it at home as well, which is a problem.
That is a problem
because I'm now overstimulated.
I mean, what does your wife?
She finds it extremely unsettling.
Amusing.
Unsettling. Amusing would have been.
I thought
amusing
I heard
would
you
be
say
better.
amusing. Maybe
amusing
I was.
Would be better.
Yeah, that would be better. Yeah, I mean, look.
She's sort of like, why do you have 3 separate devices on your lap and
you have
3 different pairs of headphones?
Be as plugged in as you can be possibly.
Exactly. I'm basically Neuralinked right now.
Constant stimulation. Yeah. Exactly. Hello, friends. Hello. How are you? So Bradley, how did your March Madness picks fare? A lot of people are not happy about how things are shaking out. I mean, like, what I feel like the people who should be the least happy are the other Big East teams that didn't make it, because UConn, Marquette, Creighton, all 3 Big East teams ended up moving on to the Sweet 16. Those are the 3 that were representing them, right? And then like there was no, I mean, Seton Hall didn't make it.
Yeah, and St. John's and Seton Hall both probably had a claim to make, because St. John's also gave UConn a pretty valiant effort in the Big East tournament. So, which also makes it show that I was listening to Ken Pomeroy on the Distraction podcast last week previewing the tournament. Pomeroy is like the, marquee ranker of all of the teams, more of the NCAA college teams, more by like advanced stats than anything else. And Seton Hall and St. John's were actually ahead of some teams that ultimately did make the bracket, but he was also concluding that basically it seems as if some of the selection committee just wasn't actually taking that much into account from the conference championships, aside from obviously winning the conference championship, meaning you get an at-large berth automatically into the tournament.
Yeah.
Which they probably should have been, because I think by all accounts, St. John's and Seton Hall actually deserved a shot.
I mean, it's just more and more smoke on the competition committee, which was already facing significant criticism ahead of this. So, I mean, let's just rattle off the teams that we have left here. Alabama, they advanced. Arizona, Clemson, Creighton, Duke, Gonzaga, Houston survived. That was like a nail biter.
It was an unbelievable game. It was awesome. Yeah.
Illinois, Iowa State, Marquette, NC State, who's seemingly everybody's favorite, North Carolina, Purdue, San Diego State. They're rematching, I guess, with UConn.
The finals from last year in the Sweet 16.
Very fun. Tennessee and UConn.
There are a lot of fascinating matchups here, I think, because, well, first of all, in highlighting some of the round of 32 action, Grand Canyon, I'm going to be honest, I'm not entirely sure this school is real.
Right.
It's a for-profit university in Phoenix, which gives me all the alarm bells that it's not actually real, that it's potentially a sports washing unit in Phoenix. But that being said, an absolutely fascinating story. Team led by college basketball nepo baby extraordinaire Bryce Drew, brother of Scott Drew, the Baylor head coach, and son of Homer Drew, who was the longtime head coach of Valparaiso in Indiana. Bryce Drew is known for he was a player on Valparaiso, and he made what NCAA college basketball enthusiasts refer to as the shot, a incredible buzzer beater that brought that
That's the shot, but not the Michael Jordan.
Yeah,
shot.
no. Like one of these shots is Bryce Drew, buzzer beater for Valparaiso.
Okay.
And so
there's always the catch too in the NFL.
Yes, right, exactly.
And like
it's like 3 or 4, maybe.
Lynn
David
Swan,
Tyree.
yeah, David Tyree.
I
think there's a Jerry Jones. I mean,
Right.
not Jerry Jones. Jerry Rice one.
Exactly,
Go on, keep going. Yeah.
But so he's the coach now of Grand Canyon, and honestly, he did a fantastic job recruiting for this team. This team is extremely. They have length. They're extremely athletic. Play extremely hard on defense. They were kind of a terrible matchup for St. Mary's, who they faced in the first round, because St. Mary's is a much more kind of like finesse, good on defense, but not particularly athletic team. Great 3-point shooters, but because of the length that Grand Canyon had and the strength that they had, they were getting into the paint basically at will, forcing contact, forcing fouls that Grand Canyon capitalized on the whole game, and they basically wouldn't let them shoot threes because they were blocking all their threes.
Right.
How long these guys' arms are and how intensely they play defense. So it was an interesting matchup going into Alabama, who was an incredible offensive team, but a very bad defensive team. But credit to Alabama, Grand Canyon kept it close, but Alabama basically locked down on defense in a kind of unprecedented way, but had more than enough offense to take care of them. So I think Alabama going into the Sweet 16 is still a formidable opponent for anybody, just because of how good
their program
scores
is
are.
and their scores are. Right. Yeah.
And then another interesting matchup, besides the UConn-San Diego State rematch from last year, is the battle of the perennial losers in Purdue and Tennessee.
Yeah,
the Matt Painter, Rick Barnes knife fight of the two guys who
underperformers
of the two guys who have constantly. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Not Purdue and Tennessee.
No. It's a Creighton in Tennessee.
But Purdue and Gonzaga. So the other one I'm thinking of, which is Mark Few and Matt Painter.
Creighton doesn't count. I guess.
Right.
I mean, but of those, the Gonzaga Purdue one, that's going to be on Friday.
Because Matt Painter and Mark Few both have been at their respective schools, Purdue and Gonzaga, for the better part of my entire life.
Right.
Matt Painter, I think, has been the coach of Purdue since like 2001, and Few has been the coach since like around the same time, 1999, 2000. And they have always perennially been extremely competitive, have always gotten very far into the tournament. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is Gonzaga's 9th straight Sweet 16, which is insane.
Yeah.
But they've never won the title.
Right.
So this will be a real matchup for the one team to continue to advance while the other one doesn't again.
So I didn't watch all of the games. I watched some of them. I particularly was interested from a wagering perspective in the Michigan State UNC game, because I took the points with Michigan State, and that looked really good to start. And then in the end, UNC just is so much more athletic and bigger too. I mean, that's what stuck out. Their ability to kind of like lock down on defense when they wanted to. So I was pretty impressed by their ability to come back, and they went to their bench fairly early on. They're deep as well, UNC.
Yeah, and that's also a that is a example, as what I was saying with the Grand Canyon St. Mary's thing, is that just sometimes, honestly, especially in these college matchups, 1-game samples, it's just truly sometimes like what advantages, just from a purely like fundamental standpoint, what advantages does a team have over the other? And when a smart team just spams those advantages, I think that's kind of what leads them to win. Like UNC having a size and athleticism advantage over Michigan State, a smart coach, which Hubert Davis is a smart coach, was just like, I'm going to, nail that advantage over and over and over again.
And I feel like some great basketball coaches also have a great understanding of how to ride certain energy and what gives a spark to their team. So it'll be an interesting matchup. I think that's one of the first ones on Thursday night, UNC versus Alabama. We have Arizona against Clemson also on that Thursday.
Clemson with a very impressive run. I mean, as I was saying on the program last week, they were, or maybe I'm trying to remember if we had talked about this already, but Clemson was coming into their game in New Mexico, their first round game, with New Mexico, who was the 11 seed, 2.5 point underdogs to New Mexico.
Yeah.
And then Clemson is here making the Sweet 16. So they were definitely underestimated from the start of this tournament. So it's pretty cool that they were able to get this far regardless of that.
Right. And then, we have that matchup between UConn and SDSU, as we mentioned earlier.
The Houston-Duke matchup, I'm very excited
You're
for.
excited about that. Houston is, as advertised, fun as hell.
They're incredible. It was a fascinating game last night because they were basically in control against Texas A&M the entire game until finally a few of A&M shooters got hot after they were having a pretty glacial run of it in the game last night. And also, kind of unfortunately, Houston just got into some ticky-tack foul trouble, like a few on the floor fouls, just got the A&M guys to the line in the last second of the game, basically.
Yeah.
Anderson, I think his name's Anderson Garcia, this is a player from the Dominican Republic. He put up a last second three, tied the game 86-86. Tied the game 86-86.
Yeah.
Sorry, I felt that for a second. Tied the game 86-86, and then they went into overtime. But Houston, I think, just from a pure same thing, talent perspective, athleticism perspective, they just were able to kind of run away with it with an extra period. So
yeah, and
I think the great matchup between the two teams, Houston and Duke.
Screw Duke. So I'll be definitely rooting for Houston.
Kelvin Sampson is an awesome coach and in particular player coach. It's so clear how much they play for him and how competitive he is and how that energy feeds off of them. Jamal Sheed, who is kind of their or Jamal Shed, I don't exactly, Shead, I don't exactly know how to pronounce it. He is like kind of the lifeblood of the Houston team. He played every minute of yesterday's overtime game. He's like 6'1", but is one of the most athletic people I think I've seen in the last like 5 years in this tournament. He can jump like basically like forehead high to the rim, and he's 6'1".
All right.
So, I love this Houston team, and I do hope they beat Duke and get to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, and then they would be facing either NC State or Marquette. And again, NC State, the lowest seed still around, the only 11 seed left. I mean, it's all pretty standard. To the point of on the competition committee would probably be like, hey, we did the seeding right. We at least did the seeding right, even if the teams that were included weren't the best. Then you have Gonzaga, Purdue, Creighton, Tennessee, as we mentioned. We've got to then quickly talk. Who are your Elite Eight predictions then? I'm going to go through it.
Okay, yeah.
UConn is going to beat us.
I would say UConn.
San Diego.
Yeah.
Iowa State or Illinois?
Yeah, see, Iowa State is a they're both really, really good teams, and I think they have some experience with one another, just being from the same proximity. But I would still say Illinois. I think Illinois has a lot of good NBA level talent, and Iowa State. But Iowa State is also one of those teams that has a real kind of like identity on
system.
Defense.
Yeah.
So I think it's also like, can Illinois exploit that, or will they just kind of lock down? But I would still say Illinois. I trust Illinois.
UNC or Alabama?
I'm going to say Alabama just because of how high-octane Alabama's offense is. And UNC does play pretty slowly. It's not a very, dynamic offense. They're smart. They know exactly what they're doing. But Alabama just has a lot of, high-intensity, high-powered offense that they can go to. And if they could play any defense the way they played against Grand Canyon, I think, obviously, North Carolina is a different beast. But I still think they'd have a shot.
Right.
I'm going to say Alabama.
And if they can get going scoring, maybe they can kind of play at their own pace, Alabama, if they want to.
Right.
Arizona versus Clemson.
I say Arizona. Arizona's really, really talented.
Yeah. So you have Alabama versus Arizona. That would be a fun matchup.
For sure.
All right. Then we're looking at, do you think Houston's going to beat Duke?
I'm going to say yes. I would love that to happen, but I also just think Houston is one of the most, I would say, comprehensively talented squads.
Let's say Houston just because that's the thing that everybody wants, right? That's fun, right? Let's just go for it.
I definitely don't want. I would of two teams. I would always want Houston to beat Duke, but I actually think they're better than them this year.
Okay, sure. NC State or Marquette? I'm going
to say Marquette. Marquette, and it's a good story. It's a great season for NC State, but Marquette is also just so good.
Purdue and Gonzaga.
I'm going to say Gonzaga.
I knew you were going to say Gonzaga.
Gonzaga always shows up for the tournament, at least to the point of getting to the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight. And we just still haven't seen Zach Edey actually like dominate in an elimination game.
Yeah, I know. I mean, he is a player that I think like NBA people are fairly negative on from what I've heard based on his like he seems like prototypical college star that won't translate because his athleticism doesn't seem to be right there.
And also just in terms of like the dimensionality of a big man now, like you need to be able to shoot threes.
Yes,
like,
right.
And he just doesn't do that.
He can't do that. It's very, very hard.
And defend in space, and he also doesn't do that.
Even the guys that are bad shooters in the NBA are better shooters than
you need to have like a
they could score in college
30% stroke.
Yeah.
I don't even think you would have that honestly.
And then who was the final matchup here? Okay, Tennessee Creighton. You're saying Creighton, I'd imagine, right? Wow, interesting. You have faith in this Tennessee squad?
They are it's so hard though because they are genuinely really good. It's also just like the Rick Barnes-ness is just literally the only thing keeping me from it. But I would say Tennessee, honestly.
Yeah. I was just looking up Draymond Green just for shits and gigs, his college stats. I mean, even he was averaging 10.5 points a game.
Yeah, they're right.
So,
he showed something of a three ball. Like he at least like tried to shoot threes.
Right. All right, so you're going with Tennessee then?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Tennessee.
Okay, all right. So
I'm saying all of this completely unencumbered for my bracket because it's so destroyed already that I have no allegiance to it anymore.
It's you shouldn't. So we're starting anew, and we'll see how this
bracket
ages on because this will be like these games are Thursday, Friday, so we'll be able to talk about this on Monday again.
Very exciting.
UConn versus Illinois. You have Alabama versus Arizona, Houston versus Marquette, and Gonzaga versus Tennessee.
Those would be
in
good. All
the
would be very
Elite
good games.
Eight. Very good games.
And then on the women's side.
Yes, that was where I was going to go next. Good job.
There was an amazing game last night that coincided with the Houston Texas A&M game, the Iowa State-Stanford game, which Stanford ultimately did win, but Iowa State put up a very good fight. Iowa State's a pretty exciting team on the women's side. They have this incredible player. I want to make sure I get her name right. I think it's Audie.
Audie, yes, Audie. What's her last name? Steele?
No, Audie Crooks.
Crooks. Who am I thinking
incredible.
of? Yeah, she's incredible. I saw her press conference. First of all, I saw some of her highlights, and then I saw her press conference afterwards when she was speaking about her dad.
I know, it was so sweet.
Who died of cancer when she was 16. How he was sitting front row, and I'm like, oh my God, yeah. Went back when she was 16. How old is she now? What,
when she was 16,
19 years old?
Which was 4 years ago.
Yeah, 4 years ago or 3 years ago.
I'm sorry. Actually, she's even younger than
she's 19 years old.
She's 19, so when she was 16,
she's 6'3".
Yeah.
She's the second tallest player on her team, but she's also just like extremely strong. She could bully these other women in the paint. I mean, that was incredible to see. She was really exciting and clearly like a Cinderella story.
And it was a fascinating matchup for specifically in that game because Crooks is extreme. Crooks almost like has like it's not a 1-to-1 comparison by any stretch, but she has a little bit of like a Jokic type game for like on the women's side of things. And what I mean by
like, how'd that get in the basket?
Right, in the sense that she is she's very strong. She has great positionality. Like she always knows how to get like right into a good post up matchup, and her touch is extremely soft around the basket, which is super important when you are able to get that type of positioning below the basket. But then there's this woman on Stanford, Cameron Brink, who was doing a lot of the defending of Crooks, and it was a fascinating matchup because it was sort of Crooks' size and touch against Cameron Brink, who is who's a bit taller, different body composition. Her length was what was really helping her tamp down on Crooks' scoring because her long arms were able to get up and block some of Crooks' shots.
Yeah.
So that was a great matchup because they were both really going at it. And Brink has a bit of an attitude, which was like
totally
fun to see in a one-on-one matchup in the post like that. But so Stanford ultimately advanced, but it was a really crazy game right until the end.
Crooks reminded me of this girl I went to high school with, who I played tennis with, who was like kind of a bigger girl, right? But was so powerful. But she was such a good athlete that people would be like, all right, if I hit it hard back, like she's not gonna be able to reach it and run to the other side of the court and get and return it. But they underestimated her athleticism.
Totally. And
like she's a really, really strong athlete at both the point of contact, obviously, but even just in terms of like just being deceptively quick.
And that's what I thought was so impressive is the footwork and the touch around the basket, which is like for people, for power forwards or centers in both men's and women's sport and basketball and just at any level, that type of touch around the rim is like not promised to somebody with size.
Yeah.
Like sometimes that is ultimately what sinks people, is that either A, they can't protect around the rim, or B, they can't score around the rim.
Yeah.
And so she really has that package already. And and as you said, she's literally 19 years old.
Yeah.
Like she's only going to get so much better as she gets older.
Are there games being played right now? Yeah, Tennessee, NC State is being played right now as we speak for the women's tournament. So we don't, unlike the men's, we do not have the like final results here, but we do like we do have some of the teams that are in the Sweet 16 at this point. Like Iowa's obviously the top draw with Caitlin Clark. They're playing tonight against West Virginia. LSU has advanced, and we'll touch on that in this second. But
in a surprisingly close game with Middle Tennessee.
Yeah.
But they ultimately pulled it out just because that team is so talented. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a bunch of future NBA players.
Totally.
WNBA players at LSU. So.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, that draft,
Reese.
this draft for the WNBA is going to be absolutely bonkers. And I was saying this to Sam and others on the show earlier, is like, I was listening to Larry David on Rich Eisen. I listen to Rich Eisen fairly regularly. Larry is the best interview, and he clearly
He's
listens.
so freaking funny.
He clearly listens to Rich too, and so he was having such a ball on the program. And you expect him to be like his Curb character, but he's so much more personable, warm, and friendly, and that's what I think just makes me one of my favorite people to listen to. Anyway, he was saying, Rich was like, "Oh, are you following March Madness?" And he was like, "Oh, who has time for this? Like, who has time for this?" I watch the Knicks games. He tapes the Rangers and Knicks games and watch them in the morning.
That's a classic move.
Totally.
That's a classic old guy
move. And
move.
he doesn't want anybody to text him, so he does it because he's on the West Coast, right? So, and so I relate to him as a Knicks and Rangers fan. But he was saying, how many players, like men's basketball players, could you name? And he was like, I can't name any. I can only name one college basketball player, and that's Caitlin Clark. And that is, I think, like the impact right now of the women's game. So just we'll see how the results shake out here for the Sweet 16. But let's put that aside for a second to talk about the big story that's coming out in the WNBA. Sorry, not the WNBA, in women's college basketball.
If you heard what Kim Mulkey had to say, it's actually not a big deal.
Oh, it's not a big story.
And you actually should not go and subscribe to the Washington Post to wait for this story to break, because there's clearly nothing going on actually untoward in any way.
Well, let's hear her in her own words here, Bradley. Thank you for bringing up Kim Mulkey and her response to the upcoming story, where she complains that she has not been given enough time to respond to this story coming out in the Washington Post, an expose on her conduct, which has long been scrutinized. One, for her like alleged mistreatment of Brittany Griner. There were rumblings that she potentially may have told her not to be forthright about her sexuality. She was not supportive of Brittany Griner when Brittany was locked up in Russia as a political prisoner. Her former college coach did not back her. And it's also just like the way that she comes off. I mean, I went to an all-girls school in New Jersey, okay? There were Republican moms that had this exact aura. And I think there are some people that know exactly what I'm talking about.
It's triggering.
She reminds me of like every mom that hated me if I wasn't, if I didn't make a basket, or if I missed a shot in tennis when I was screaming in people's faces, wearing their pastel sweaters draped over their shoulders. This is the energy that Kim gives off, but like on steroids. No pun intended. So this is Kim Mulkey announcing that the Washington Post expose is coming out about her. Again, the reporter has been working on it for 2 years. She has had 2 years to respond, but is now bitching that she's only been giving 48 hours to respond to the reporting, which is just standard. When reporters reach out and you're the subject or you're in a piece, they'll give you 48 hours to respond. But she's known about this for years. So spare me these crocodile tears or crocodile outrage for that. Crocodile screaming, for that matter. Thank you, Bradley.
Former players have told me that the Washington Post has contacted them and offered to let them be anonymous in a story if they'll say negative things about me. The Washington Post has called former disgruntled players to get negative quotes to include in their story. They're ignoring the 40 plus years of positive stories that people or they have heard from people about me. But you see, reporters who give a megaphone to a one-sided embellished version of things aren't trying to tell the truth. They're trying to sell newspapers and feed the click machine. This is exactly why people don't trust journalists and the media anymore. It's these kinds of sleazy tactics and hatchet jobs that people are just tired of. I'm fed up.
Oh.
And I'm not going to let the Washington Post attack this university, this awesome team of young women I have, or me without a fight. I've hired the best defamation law firm in the country, and I will sue the Washington Post if they publish a false story about me. Not many people are in a position to hold these kind of journalists accountable, but I am. And I'll do it. That's all I'm going to say about this right now. And now I'm going to get back to talking about my basketball team and winning this game tomorrow.
Guilty on energy alone.
There's a hit piece coming out. It is in the Washington Post, and I believe it is coming out tomorrow. Do not think about it for one more second as I go on a 2.5 minute tirade about inaccurate reporting. All right, next question.
Yeah, right. She is.
Okay, now that we have that out of the way, next question.
Is it low-hanging fruit to call her a Karen?
No.
I mean, it just is, right?
Look at the glasses. Look at the glasses and the Lin Tui haircut.
I mean, let alone the damn outfits that she wears on the floor, which are like puffy sleeves.
Oh yeah,
ones that like she could be.
It's interesting who is allowed to have creative expression.
Wow.
With their aesthetics and who isn't.
And you know, like I just. Can Lily Pulitzer vomiting all over you really count as creative expression? For me, I feel like there's like a
form of violence.
It's
actually offensive.
Like there's a point where creative expression becomes so distasteful to one's eye and so Republican coded that it makes it counts as stochastic terrorism. I can never say that word, and Bradley always needs to help me out. Anyway, yeah. So this is going to be bad, and I'd imagine she's been incredibly racist towards her players. That's the energy that I get.
It's the
obviously.
absolute most like Streisand effect thing to ever Streisand.
Totally.
That she like by wanting to make such a clear statement that like she is the victim in this situation, and that as well as employing the classic Trumpian framework of every good thing reported about me is true and every bad thing reported about me is false.
And I'm going to sue the Washington Post. Let's see how that goes. I don't think Bezos and co were that worried about it.
Yeah, I anticipate the court filing that'll probably be threatened for 2.5 months by the former Gawker attorney or whoever she hired as her defamation counsel, which actually never goes anywhere because that's usually how these
Mike
legal
Lindell's
threats
on
go.
the case.
Right. But the hysterical thing too is like I love that framing though. If they don't mention any of the good stories. This is a good story. I'm trying to remember who said this. Wouldn't it be a shame to keep COVID testing and that you got kids testing positive or something and they don't get to play in the Final Four? So you need to just forget the COVID test and let the 4 teams that are playing in each Final Four go battle it out.
Yeah, that sounds like it's going to be a real misrepresentation of her.
That was one of those good moments from Kim Mulkey 4 years ago during March when the novel coronavirus was raging with no palliative or available treatments.
She should be fired. I don't really care. Just on energy alone, I don't care. Women are like extremely talented. That LSU team, there's a reason that last year they made such waves that they were, the champions. Like the fact that they are that talent, I don't know. I guess I have a bit of a jaundiced eye towards college coaches. I think so much of it is about recruiting the best talent, and then you can be a motivator, and that's about it. There are some good ones, and there are some bad ones, but I don't know how good a good college coach is. I'll be real. Because I think it's a totally different game when you're in the pros. There's more strategy. It's more about, like, actually managing personalities because, for example, like, they're actually getting paid. And in college sports, I know Caitlin Clarkson State Farm commercials and stuff, but it's for the most part they're not getting paid, so you have more power over them, and you can treat it more like a military exercise as opposed to being an actual strategist. So the talent just does so much more work on the college game than it does in professional sports.
And I think the
football applies too.
And I think the dynamics of the actual professional responsibilities are slightly different because there's something a little bit more manipulable about the recruiting aspect.
Yeah.
Where a coach is like kind of attempting to sort of, and I don't mean this in like that I see this as like pernicious or anything. I just more mean like the actual idea of like a recruiting visit, for example, is like this coach is going to your home to meet your parents, to like to ingratiate him or herself to your child, to be like be trustworthy, be trusting in me to essentially be like a surrogate for you as a coach is to a player. In that type of relationship, like a professional head coach is not doing that because it's an employee-employer relationship, not a just simple coach-athlete relationship with no other mitigating factors to kind of swing the power dynamic in the favor of the player. The coach-player dynamic in the NCAA is always mostly exploitative from one way to the other. There's no real advocacy ability.
Yeah.
That a player in the NFL can have to be like, hey, you can't treat me like this because I'm not only a star on this team or a really important part of this team, I'm also getting paid more money than you.
Yep.
Like, I actually have more leverage and negotiating power than you do.
Exactly.
So, for example, like that's the reason why, a guy like Urban Meyer gets penalized in Jacksonville because he can't treat his players like he could at Ohio State or Florida or Utah or wherever. That's why some guys just don't work out who made it. Nick Saban never worked out in the NFL. Certain things don't translate because they're different jobs, and they're different jobs because of the different power dynamics at play here. So, like, does it surprise me that somebody like Kim Mulkey would say something like that in 2020, but also has a slew of other reports around her behavior towards some of her student athletes? No, not at all. And I bet every single word of it's true.
Me too.
I don't think you'd get this response about it if this stuff actually wasn't true.
All right, let's read it. I'm excited. We got to get to it. I'm excited. Washington Post, drop the T.
Yeah, drop it right now.
Vermont Ben said no Ohtani talk today on ESVN. What can I talk about? There's no information about Ohtani.
I don't know
ever. He's apparently going to address it today, and then we'll talk about it on next Monday. So there's no information
beyond the reporting about the interpreter's involvement. Every single other thing about what Shohei potentially knew about the allegations towards the interpreter prior to, or whether he had any personal involvement, as far as I know, is completely hearsay and completely speculative on social media. I don't believe there's actually any substantive reporting on anything that's gone on.
No, that's the problem.
With Shohei's personal involvement potentially.
Well, I would not be shocked if he was, right? I mean, it seems very fishy, but I'm not going to talk about it when we don't have an actual article where someone did an investigation.
Because all we have right now is the ESPN or some of the reporting aggregated, just the fact that the interpreter is being implicated in this, and then some jokes about how Ohtani attended a Gonzaga Texas Tech game in 2021. People are like, why would he go to that? He must be betting, which again, incredibly hilarious for sure. Why the fuck was he at that game? But that's not. I can't make an argument off that.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, look, the problem would be if he's betting on Major League Baseball games. I really don't care too much if players bet on other sports. But
No, definitely not.
The problem becomes when, say, they're reckless with it and then they get into gambling debts. I'm not worried about that for Ohtani, but if they get into gambling debts, the problem is then they're tempted to start to throw their own games. Like, this is going to be a problem for all sports.
But this is the issue we also have been talking about primarily, which just rings so hollow to me, where it's like, you know, these stern rebukes about sports gambling. And again, as you said, gambling debt is a different animal, right? Because that involves actually like needing to recoup something or make something whole with potential, you know, financial or even, I don't know, depending on how seedy some characters can be in the gambling world, personal repercussions as well. Which I'm not alleging with Shohei at all. I just more mean like that's a different story than just saying I enjoy sports gambling. However, it's really tough to then be like, you know, have the stern rebuke of a player potentially, or any player, and I mean this with like the Calvin Ridley situation, you know, some other, even Pete Rose way back in the which was a different, you know, its own saga in the MLB, but it's hard to do this when, you know, every single broadcast is now sponsored by DraftKings and FanDuel, and that there are gambling lines adorning every gambling lines and gambling graphics adorning every single broadcast now. It's just hard not to see these leagues kind of talking out of both sides of their mouths, where they're like, hey, gambling's really bad, but it's now comprising an enormous amount of our revenue and sponsorship deals.
Totally. They have let their greed get ahead of their planning. I mean, which is totally in keeping with everything we know about these leagues.
Of course, yeah.
We'll talk about it when we have a little more information on Monday. Sure. So big news, I think, out of the competition committee that I don't really love. Like, I'm seeing the chief dumbass in the world, Emmanuel Acho, is like, this is so stupid, horrible. Okay, he never really fails to be on the wrong side of any issue.
I'm sort of inclined to just like disagree with him on principle.
And I like, and JJ Watt's corny, but he actually sometimes has some thoughtful takes, and he was very upset about this. And a lot of defensive players are not happy about the NFL banning, and the competition committee, which voted on it unanimously, banning the hip drop tackle. Now, I don't agree with those defensive players, but I understand why they got to this point. And let me explain. So a hip drop tackle is basically when a defender goes and grabs, as they're running, basically, a ball carrier, so a pass catcher. This is what happened to Mark Andrews earlier in the year. They hang on to them by their waist, and then they twist their body and fall down, letting the gravity of their body take the player down with them. And this has resulted in some lower leg injuries. Some really, I think the broken, was it the fibula that Tony Pollard had the year previously was also a hip drop tackle. There have been a lot of really rough injuries this year in particular as a result of the hip drop tackle.
Just to confirm what you were saying, I mean, Pollard was a victim of a hip drop tackle in January 2023 playoff loss to the Niners, carted off with a fractured fibula and a high ankle sprain.
Right. So those are some of the like notable instances. If you could find the rest of them, they're kind of escaping me off the top of my head. But Mark Andrews, obviously, that was a Tyreek Hill. I can't believe he came back from that. But yeah, that the Mark Andrews one was the one that really stuck out to everybody as like kind of the quintessential example of the hip drop tackle. And it happened to Mahomes one year. Tony Pollard's another example, as I mentioned earlier. So people can look up the other visual examples of why of this particular play, and some people say like, oh, this looks like just a regular tackle. A regular tackle is about wrapping up and then maybe falling forward, as opposed to using your gravity to twist and fall down, which results in these guys having their lower leg sometimes mangled or really severely injured, if not broken in the case of Pollard. So I'm in favor of this because I prefer a more traditional tackle for safety reasons, but I can understand why there are a lot of really just callous, or that's not really the right word, but frustrated defensive players because of all of the other rules that are not benefiting them, because the league wants more offense and they want to protect quarterbacks. So these roughing the passer penalties are out of control. You can barely touch a quarterback, without getting a flag. That is why they're frustrated. They're also frustrated that it seems to be like when offensive pass interference happens, it often falls on the defender, and those plays are massive. I wish that the NFL Competition Committee would review the spot of the foul pass interference call, because I just think it's just such a bad incentive. A lot of guys are just throwing up the football. It's a 50-50 situation. And if the offensive player can kind of goad a defender into a pass interference call, or even if there is very, very barely any contact, they're going to get that call every time. So 15-yard penalty for hip drop, fine by the league, potentially. The injury rate is very high. But then the other piece that is so hypocritical is that the NFL needs to ban turf fields. That's also contributing to these injuries. If not just the high ankle or the broken, fibula injuries or whatever, it is contributing to torn ACLs, guys out for the year. Like, that is, if they're so concerned about player safety, it's the hypocrisy of it and how sided it is on the defensive side. But I wish we could pull back some of those rules on the defensive side, keep a hip drop penalty, and then also move away from the damn turf fields. That's the biggest problem for guys' lower bodies at this point. Not hip drops, turf.
And it's notable, too, that is like mostly just primarily by virtue of owners' unwillingness to like make those more significant structural changes that actually affect across all players.
Yeah.
The play on the field with turf, and how uncharitable it is to players' bodies and players' movement on the field. As we saw it so many times, especially in MetLife. I mean, Aaron Rodgers down with a torn Achilles.
Yep.
Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, both out for the season with lower leg injuries when playing on a turf field. These things really prop up very often, and yet that is not seen as something that would constitute a so-called like rules change, or like big kind of like shift in how the NFL operates. It's there's going to be more now as a result of this, which I agree with you. I don't necessarily think it's completely wrong-headed. I just always worry about the continual over-legislating of the on-field product that ultimately leads to more gray area, because there's like always a difficulty in parsing the specific actual execution of these calls.
Right.
Like, they become so detailed in terms of how it's supposed to be enforced, that if it doesn't meet a certain criteria, or if it does, there's really no full way to, I would say, actually evenly determine what a hip drop is. And also, I think it potentially, as a result of banning it, or as a result of more stringent penalties on it, it's going to then become another thing in the rigmarole of bickering over fouls, where it's like, was this a hip drop tackle or wasn't it? Oh, they never called this. They haven't called this in ages. Why are they calling it now? Like, I think there's been. I
like the hip drop, man, to be real. Like, that's what I was saying.
I'm not against it either.
Yeah.
I think the only reason I would have any sort of skepticism about it, in lieu of something, as you said, of like working on the turf field issue,
Yep.
trying to also even it out with potential other benefits, so that defense isn't so disadvantaged due to a call like this, with other rulings that could kind of even it out. That sometimes there's still always this over legislating, over replayifying kind of issue that kind of can grind certain games to a halt.
Yeah.
So if this isn't like evenly enforced, or it's not uniformly enforced, or it's not properly enforced, if the refs don't get this right, it's just going to be another headache that they're going to try and legislate again afterwards when they say like, oh, this isn't working. How can we make it work again? Let's try and redetermine the rule. Like now, as we've seen with basically not knowing what a freaking catch is at this point.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Does a catch like survive the ground? It's like I don't know what that even means in a common context, let alone a football context.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I understand why they're upset about it. I just think that it's more holistic than the hip drop tackle in and of itself. I guess they're also reviewing the kickoff and a new alternate rule, but they're keeping the tush push, which we have both said. Just because the Eagles were graded, it doesn't mean that we should ban.
I would submit to you that I think both me and you and I agree on. I don't think without Jason Kelce on the team that the Eagles are going to have have the same amount of success with it. I think if anything, if my prediction is proven correct, I actually think keeping the tush push in play and showing the difference between Jason Kelce's success with the tush push and the Eagles post Jason Kelce will actually be more of a example of why it actually should remain, because it's a football play that actually requires skill and is not like a cheat code or like a rugby play. There's a literal rugby player on the freaking Eagles who was like, I played rugby. This is not a rugby play.
It'll be interesting to see too how their like really, really short yardage game is affected by the fact that Kelsey's gone and the fact that they have just signed Saquon Barkley, who is not a guy that really gets you easy yards. He likes to dance around behind the line of scrimmage a lot. So we shall see how that goes.
There's no spice behind that.
There's no spice.
That was purely uncritical analysis.
Dude, I mean, I know he's probably a nice guy, but I've always had a thing where I'm just like, I don't like
something is like
there's
not
something off. Like you are a politician, but you're not even good at it. Like you are always trying to position yourself in the spotlight in a way that like also makes you seem like a Boy Scout, but I don't think you are though. I don't think you are, and I don't know if you got the winning mentality.
But as much as I have always, I
just hated the pick, so I'm so biased. I can't even.
Of course, I know that.
But I think I'm right about this a little.
As much as I have always admired his talent, I will say I also feel like the way he has sometimes presented himself or comported himself is also not fully in line with like the actual like on-field results, right? Because like he's always had moments of greatness, but it's always been marred by also like inconsistency and injuries. So I also think the real gamble for the Eagles is like putting that much investment into him is maybe your number one back.
He's not a straight ahead runner too. I mean, that's just not what his skill. He needs to get into space, and then he's an incredible athlete.
Right. So we'll see.
We'll see. All right, so let's wrap up here because I had been meaning to give everybody an update on the NHL playoff race, as like the Rangers are one of the teams that are in competition for the President's Trophy, which I pray they don't get because of the curse. I have been, just extremely invested really in the NHL, and I'm getting back there as OG Anunoby starts to get back and the Knicks are starting to kind of round into form for the playoffs. We'll be talking about the NBA as well. But exciting times in the NHL, I think, because there is so much parity right now that we're going to have a really, really great playoffs that I don't think anybody can anticipate. Now, when you look at some of the analytics about the teams and their goals for versus their goals against, the Oilers are actually really well positioned this year in a way that they haven't been previously, which is interesting after their terrible start to the year. And I know that Connor McDavid was banged up and everything. But the Oilers, they've lost 2 in a row, but they're 2 games behind. They've played 2 fewer games than the Canucks in the Pacific. And they could potentially take the division there, which then if they have one of those wild card teams, which since the Predators have been surging, the Nashville Predators have gone, Bradley, 8-0-2 in their last 10. And I think they've gotten points in 15 straight or something like that.
That's pretty awesome because I feel like the last 2 or 3 seasons after being kind of like perennial playoff entrance, they had sort of hit a bit of a stagnating period. Yeah, and I always love when the Preds are good because to me they're such a platonic ideal of a team for me as a non-partisan observer.
Yes.
I love the colors, I love the uniforms.
They have their own traditions.
Fan base. Yeah,
and they went to that year that they went to the finals recently was God, when was that?
2020?
I don't think that was it. Couldn't have
I
been.
think it was in the last like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah,
something like that.
My
Yeah.
brain is completely
No,
mush.
it's
But
hard
no,
to
they are
remember.
15-0-2 in their last
Damn,
17. So
that's
they have
crazy.
surged into the top wild card spot.
That's awesome.
Which is really interesting because the Golden Knights have now fallen to the second wild card spot after a really rough stretch a few weeks ago where they lost to the Bruins, the Sabres, the Blue Jackets, and the Canucks. So that's like a bit of a skid, and I know injuries are plaguing them as well. But it really is I think the top 6 teams, maybe really the top 7. It's the final wild card spot with the Blues, the Wild, and the Golden Knights vying for it. They're kind of set at this point. I mean, I guess the Kings as well. The Kings are going to be vying for it at 2.
That's even crazy. Like just to show how well and how deep the league is in terms of competitiveness, that like the reigning Stanley Cup champions are like haggling for the wild card spot.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, and again, they've been plagued by injuries, but still, and no one saw the Jets coming out of nowhere.
No, the Jets have been,
or the Canucks coming out of nowhere in the Pacific,
which
right?
is incredible. Like the Jets and Canucks both, I feel like especially in the beginning of the season, the Canucks' early success was like, oh, it's like a fun little story. It's going to peter out, and like somehow, some way, they've just completely maintained it to still be very much in this going into the playoffs. And same thing with the Jets. Like, I don't think I certainly wasn't expecting them to be playing as well as they've been playing all year.
Yeah, the thing about the Jets though is that they can't score to keep up. In my opinion, I would think if they're a pick for me for an early exit.
And it's always the toughest thing in the NHL playoffs is that even it can get you. So we've seen this with the Islanders so many times, and which is that it really, really pays dividends to have a great defense. To augment a maybe less, like, more skeletal offense in the regular season, but if you can't score in the postseason, it is like so hard to just be to have a basically defensive stalemate against another team to eke out like 1-0 victories. Yeah,
right. And it's just not, the margins are too thin. And I mean, as incredibly as Scheifele has played, I need to quickly look at the stats because I think the highest, if I'm not mistaken, on the Winnipeg Jets, the highest scorer on their team, here we go, I'm pulling up the stats here, is Mark Scheifele at 63 points. 63 points is the highest scorer on the team. I mean, I like the
how many points is like Austin Matthews?
Kucherov, McDavid. I mean, like, let's look at these stats here. Points leaders: Kucherov has 123, McKinnon is 122, McDavid 117, Pasternak 99, Artemi Panarin has 99 points as well. And like just on the Rangers alone, there are a few players that have higher. Like, I'm just picking them at my team. I mean, Vincent Trocheck has 69 points, more than the top player on the Winnipeg Jets. Chris Kreider has 65 points. Adam Fox, who's a defenseman who also missed 10 games, has 61 points, just 2 below Mark Scheifele. So the point is just like the Winnipeg Jets just can't score to the level I think that you need to compete.
Agreed.
But this is the thing is like the Carolina Hurricanes, I'm looking at these advanced metrics. They are one of the best teams in goals for and one of the best teams in goals against. And it's
so nice to have.
Their system under Rod Brindamore is, is extremely sound, great defensively, but they have been missing, like, Sebastian Aho is a really good player, but they had been missing essentially like a higher end scorer. Now they acquired Jake Gunsel, and that's going to be the thing. He was kind of the top forward during the trade deadline. And
Gunsel is really good,
and they got Kuznetsov too. So yeah, Gunsel's really good. If is this real? Is this real where they have enough scoring to put them over the edge? Because right now they're challenging the Rangers for the top spot in the division because they've been winning like a crazy amount of games. The Carolina Hurricanes over the past few games. They've only had one loss against the Capitals, 7-6, and that they may have even gotten points in that, if I'm not mistaken. That may have been it was an overtime game.
And when we were discussing last year, kind of the playoff, the Eastern Conference playoffs, in NHL last year with the Rangers and Devils and the Devils and the Hurricanes, the Hurricanes were so impressive to me in how kind of comprehensively talented just across the board, like a real even distribution of talent, which I think was what made it so that they could win two playoff series. But as you said, that has still remained. That systematic like quality of play is still there. But I think, as you said, if Kuznetsov and Gensel can give them a little bit of like a over the edge type offensive infusion, that'll be so huge for them to maybe get to the conference finals or even get to the Stanley Cup.
Right, exactly.
I think they have like the foundation, which is so crucial of a team wide quality. But I think just a little bit of star power will go a long way for them.
And I know that the record doesn't reflect it because the Bruins are so damn good just every year, but they seem to be missing something, at least to me, from what I see on the outside, in terms of the it factor to get them over the edge in the playoffs. I'm not high on the Bruins making the Eastern Conference Final. I think I feel much better. I feel better about the Rangers. I feel better about the Carolina Hurricanes. I say feel better about the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Whoa!
But the team that I know they're on a skid, the Florida Panthers, holy crap, do they scare the bejesus out of me. And they actually play the Bruins tomorrow night, which would be a fascinating game.
If anything, they're more lethal when they lose.
They are an old school hockey team in the sense that they are a forechecking nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
You can't get them out of the offensive zone. And then when they're on the defensive end, their forwards are all responsible. And that is the thing that is just very scary. And they're so strong and physical even though they have good offense on their team, that what worries me in comparison to the Rangers is Artemi Panarin needs space. Part of what the issue was when he didn't have set plays against the Devils last year, why they had that flame out, was when you don't have space to create, the Rangers can fall apart a little bit. Adam Fox needs space to create a little bit. And they're incredibly skilled in that way. They're high-end players. But do they have that kind of tough forward grit? And I'm not talking about the stupid enforcing stuff with Matt Rempe. Real actual.
Can't believe this is the first Matt Rempe reference on the podcast.
It's constant on the national broadcast. I'm the guy plays 7 minutes a night. Shut up about Matt Rempe.
And every 33-year-old enforcer is hey buddy, want to tussle?
Everything is wrong. The obsession with Matt Rempe is everything that's wrong with the NHL. And I pray that kid stops fighting so he doesn't get so many concussions that he actually hurts himself long term. It's not good.
He's got to stop answering the call at some point.
Well, this is the problem with enforcers in the NHL and why I think it should be a banned practice. Seriously. They are not that talented as skaters, as scorers, so they know the only way to stay in the lineup is to put themselves in danger.
To be overly physical.
Rempe can't skate. I mean, he looks like an idiot out there. But he'll fight a guy and gotta stay in the lineup. The Rempe effect.
And his first goal was essentially a complete fluke.
Of course.
It was a doink shot that got stuck in the goalie's pads, basically.
It's the dumbest thing ever. I mean, come on.
He's not on there for his goal scoring potential.
Yeah.
He's on there to fight Ryan Reeves.
Exactly. So it's just I find I'm extremely obviously against the whole NHL enforcers thing. So I could see, the Florida Panthers for me are my team to win the cup, but the Avalanche,
Avs are still good.
They're good, but they still are not where they should be in terms of goals against. I think that Georgiev has been good for them, better than I thought he might be, because there have been a lot of Rangers goalies that were backups that have gone elsewhere, but when they're not under the tutelage of Benoit Allaire, who is the longtime goalie coach for the Rangers, they kind of fall apart and they fall off. But I mean, I don't know if the metrics actually back this up, so I don't want to speak to it. But I think Georgiev's been okay. You got to also watch out for the Lightning at this point in the East. I know I'm bouncing around, but
you always got to keep an eye on the Lightning.
The Lightning, they're battle tested. They have one of the top scorers in the league, if not in the end, the top scorer when it's all said and done, in Kucherov, and they are battle tested, and they will be a very, very scary wild card team. So the East is basically set, except for the oddly there are 5 teams right now which people didn't see coming. Oh wait, no, that's not true. Because the Red Wings are out now, the Capitals are in, but the Metro was supposed to be the strongest division in basically the entire NHL, but the Penguins are atrocious. The Devils have fallen off. The Islanders have fallen off. So it really has been more of an Atlantic situation with some of those teams. The final wild card spot is really going to be between the Capitals, the Red Wings, and the Philadelphia Flyers, a surprise team that sold at the deadline.
Right.
But
who seemed kind of in free fall at some point.
Yep.
So good for them to obviously.
They also can't score.
Right,
so
right. So it'll be a problem regardless, even if they do make it.
Yeah, I don't see them going far if they make it. But yeah, I guess if I were to pick my favorite team, okay, I actually didn't even mention the Dallas Stars yet.
Oh, Stars are so good. I love the Stars. That's another team.
They're another team. They remind me of the Hurricanes. They're defensively sound.
Yep.
They have a lot of really good. Can they get over the edge? I love that Tanev trade for them. I think it makes a difference. But do they have the scoring to put them over the edge in the playoffs? I don't know.
And that's exactly what I feel like that's exactly what we were seeing last year, where it was like I liked so much about that team in the playoffs last year with like how in terms of the structure, like Jamie, how good Jamie Benn always is to a degree, how and how like veteran Joe Pavelski was kind of like a North Star of sort of constant of sorts for them, and then also obviously the kind of lockdown potential for Jake Ottinger in goal. But I think what we saw is that Ottinger can absolutely turn in Herculean performances game in and game out, but there's a limit to that in terms of winning, in terms of like at some point. You can't rely on Andre to basically have like a 40 to 50 save game every time he goes out there.
Right.
Like there are going to be times where he struggles just because of how good the competition is, and the Stars need to keep up with scoring. So I do hope similar.
Robertson's a really good player.
I love Robertson. I love Jason Robertson.
Like the Hurricanes, there's a lot of good on offense, pieces. But is there great?
Right.
And that's the question. That's
Totally.
the question. So I feel really good about these are the teams that I'm high on going into the playoffs. The Florida Panthers, the New York Rangers, the Carolina Hurricanes in the East. The Capitals, by the way, have been on a tear. I think they'll end up making it because they're
that's
shocking.
They were in the basement as well, like the Flyers for a bit. So that's exciting for the Caps.
So those are the 3 teams in the East I have the most confidence in. In terms of the West, the most confidence I have, I'm going to say the Dallas Stars. I'm going to say the Oilers. I like what I'm seeing. I know that sounds crazy, but maybe this is their year.
But speaking of almost the opposite problem.
Yeah.
With the Oilers is that the foundation isn't really there. The star power is there.
Yeah.
So for them to have any sort of like supplementary skills, supplementary things to rely on to make it not just the Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl show, that's huge.
Yeah. I mean, I also liked Chris Knobloch. And so, he was the Rangers minors, like Hartford Whalers head coach for a really long time, and he had a little bit of a stint during COVID. I think when it was David Quinn got COVID, he came up and coached the team. He's known to be fairly analytically inclined and things like that, and a more forward-thinking head coach. So perhaps a new look behind the bench is something that's going to be good for them. But yeah, I can't not believe. I want to take the Kings because I love the way that the Kings play hockey. I think they're a year away, but the Kings are very scary. So I'm going to go with the Avs, the Stars, and the Oilers in terms of who I feel good about coming into the playoffs. And then, of course, once the Knights do their little salary cap machinations and they're back at full strength for the playoffs. Yeah,
pre-playoffs.
The lightning fucking cheating situation. The teams in the East that I think are maybe going to be underperforming based on expectations are the Bruins. I don't know if I see it for the Lightning. I don't know. I mean, they're dangerous, but they're really being carried a lot by Kucherov right now. I think the Jets are going to have a tough time in the West. I don't know. I'm a bit ambivalent about the Canucks. Like, I think that they also have got off to a really hot start and have been riding that a little bit. But yeah, I guess that's where I'm at right now. Exciting times, and we just have a few weeks away until the playoffs.
So someone in the YouTube chat mentioned this, but I wanted to highlight it because this is sort of part of the point I was trying to get at, as well as that. Speaking of guys like Mark Scheifele who have around 60-ish points leading their team, what's important about Zach Hyman's 60,
oh my God, right, 50 goals.
Yes, what's important about Zach Hyman's points is the fact that he has around that many points as well as Scheifele does. However, he's like the third option, and he has 50 goals for the Oilers. So like even having that insane amount of production and I say this is insane relative to like his other performances in other years.
Yeah.
To have that option that's not Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl is freaking amazing, and something that they have not had in so long in McDavid's career, to have a guy who's like, even if he's like on another team, he would probably be, maybe he'd be in this type of performance would be a star or like a 1A guy on a bad team.
Well,
to have that on the Oilers for these guys is huge.
Yeah. I mean, I think that shows a difference in approach that you're seeing from Knobloch versus past coaches, which is that McDavid and like Draisaitl is 2C, McDavid's 1C, and sometimes some coaches that I think are a little bit smarter, like Hyman's not anything that special, but he's a good complement to McDavid on the line. And you don't need a lot like you having three playmakers on your top line is actually not that good of an idea, because you need a complementary piece. That's what the Rangers were going for when they traded for Roslovic on that line with Kreider and Zibanejad, where it's like, okay, Roslovic is probably a third line player, but it's meant to balance out the skill from, I mean, I still have problems with that line, but you know what I'm saying.
But it's a similar construction as you're saying, where it's not just, where it's actually like, it's still it's offensively focused, but it's still complementary. Like give this team, like you already have firepower, but the fact that it's not just funneled through only two people is, I think, will be an extremely, I take solace in that going into the postseason, where last year I was like, where are the other like scoring capabilities coming from if Draisaitl and McDavid aren't making them? Like maybe like Evan Bouchard gets hot, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins maybe, and I'm like, okay, that's not particularly exciting.
Evander Kane, yeah,
Evander Kane, like late period of Evander Kane. So Hyman having 50 goals and playing like this, I'm like, oh, good. Like they have at least a second or third fiddle that actually can really help them in the playoffs, which they didn't have last year.
Exactly. So I actually have a lot of oddly faith in the Oilers. Famous last words.
Yeah, right.
But
I say it they're my NHL Chargers.
Yeah, right. I know.
I'm like, they're gonna get it.
If the Chargers had freaking like LeBron, I mean Patrick Mahomes on it, or like LeBron.
Right. Exactly.
Anyway, we'll read some IMs and get out of here, folks. Emma's Body Count said, I might miss it, just got out of class, but any comments on the Ohtani saga? We mentioned it earlier, but we're going to dive more once we hear this press conference and once we have more information on it next week. Stevie Wonder said, do you guys see Tom Pelissero on NFL Network just dropped that everyone thinks Washington is going to take JJ McCarthy number 2? LOL. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand what this regime is doing. I don't get it.
I hope I hope for their sake that somebody.
I actually hope for JJ McCarthy's sake.
Right. He shouldn't go second overall. I can see him going in the first round, but he shouldn't go second overall.
Yeah, over Jaden Daniels?
I would put May and Daniels over him, just in terms of even a safe bet in May.
May
a safer bet.
People don't think that, though. I think a lot of the quarterback guru guys say that Drake May's highlights are fooling people because he can make some incredible plays, but he's not really somebody that is playing the quarterback position at the same level. Yeah. JJ McCarthy, I mean, here, hold on. I got to sneeze, I think. Although as I say it, it may not. There we go. All right, it happened. So I think I would want JJ McCarthy as a player that sits for a year and puts on a little bit of muscle. Because I can see, when I see some of his, like, that highlight play of him doing that crazy throw, he's actually a great athlete, and he has a stronger arm than I thought.
He has a lot of composure for
Yes.
doing very athletic things. But as you said, if he could gain more muscle, I think that would make things so much easier for him.
Yeah.
Relative to even the flashes that we saw that were pretty awesome in certain capacities in Michigan. Also, the fact that they were so few and far between is primarily a function of Jim Harbaugh's offense.
Exactly.
Also,
That's what people are saying. And I think that he's the leader. He's the guy.
Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
seemingly
right?
a great teammate.
Yeah. Second overall?
No, but I would much rather the circumstances we've discussed with the Vikings or the Giants or whoever I would
that makes
far,
way more
far,
sense.
far prefer than taking him second overall.
Also, that poor guy. I do not want him to have to go and play in Cliff Kingsbury's offense.
The entire offseason outside of hiring Adam Peters away from the 49ers, which I just think, for the most part, I think 49ers front office guys have good track records.
But this is the Trey Lance guy.
Right. Which is, again, potentially the one mark, of course.
Who I hated coming out in the draft and did not see it. I did not understand. I did not understand that.
Of course, Washington selects the Trey Lance guy from all the 49ers guys.
Yeah, right? Man. I mean, although that draft ended up just being horrible across the board. Trevor Lawrence is the only guy who's starting left. The only guy that's starting left out of that draft. And they haven't even hit the end of their rookie deals. Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, and Mac Jones. Those were the other quarterbacks taken in that draft.
Not Pickett, though, right? Pickett was
the year after. Yeah. Either way, I mean.
Yeah, what a terrible group, unfortunately.
I mean, but it was as hyped as this group.
Oh, totally. Right.
Yeah.
In terms of high-end talent, Wilson's so athletic, you know what I mean?
I see it with JJ McCarthy, but man, are they taking a gamble.
Yeah.
I feel like someone like Jaden Daniels fits the offense better for what, and I hate the pick of Cliff Kingsbury already. But if it's gonna be a guy,
yeah,
this is Kyler Murray-esque, right?
If you're not gonna do what people may have expected for a while, which is that it would be Williams, May 1 and 2, I would totally rather, as much as I think in terms of with McCarthy having a little bit of athletic upside despite his frame, I think Daniels has more athletic upside.
Of course.
Yeah, so I would also probably
he's 6'4".
Yeah, bet on
he can put on weight. Jaden Daniels.
Bet on maybe some of that higher end athleticism than going the McCarthy route. If I'm not going to go with May, I would go with Daniels.
Maybe it's a smokescreen. I don't know.
It could be a smokescreen for sure. But I just wanted to say about May here, Emma, from Danny Kelly's draft guide, just in some of the kind of cons against him.
Yeah.
6.7 yards per attempt under pressure last year per Pro Football Focus, 7 touchdowns and 5 interceptions for a 69 passer rating. Took 29 sacks in 2023, tied for 20th in the FBS. Pressure to sack rate was 18.8%. So that probably points to a little bit of the fundamentals of not, either A, throwing the ball away, B, checking down, more kind of fundamental quarterback stuff potentially being an issue if he doesn't have a great line in front of him, for example. So I can definitely see that as being kind of like because especially in this day and age, you need a guy who can handle pressure.
Yeah, and let's also be clear: this is the time of the year when everything is a lie in the draft world. Everything.
Oh
is
yeah,
a lie.
no question. Yeah,
so we
totally.
I hear what you're saying. I wouldn't be shocked if Washington does something stupid because they haven't done one smart thing in this offseason. I hated the Dan Quinn hire. I hated the Cliff Kingsbury hire.
Oh, they're both like the biggest head scratchers. 1-2. I'm like, why would you?
I hated the Eckler signing.
I
over Antonio Gibson. They have not done one thing that has made me feel confident about this team going forward.
Agreed.
Even the way that they handled the Ben Johnson thing, where they were saying he's going to be our guy, and then he goes back.
Then try to sort of blame it on him more than them, where it's like, He would have gone if you would. There has to have been some universe where Ben Johnson would have accepted the Washington head coach.
And then Mike McDonald got hired by the Seattle Seahawks.
So they were left with neither of them.
And they were like, "Oh, Dan Quinn."
Yeah, right. We need somebody.
They could have not made it more clear they didn't initially intend to hire Dan Quinn when it's just like, then what are you doing not to get the two guys that were at the top of your list? Exactly. It signals bad things. Anyway.
Totally.
So, it could be a lie. I have no idea, but a few more M's. We're heading out. Christo says, I have 9 out of 16 left, and I have UConn, Creighton, and Marquette in the Final Four with UNC. Chris too. That is a good track record, actually. 9 of 16 being left. Pretty good.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
I'm hanging my hat on the fact that I picked Grand Canyon to win against St. Mary's and James Madison to beat Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But I also had them in my Sweet 16, which was ultimately the problem.
Right. Fabucat58 says, Grand Canyon U is somewhat real. A friend's daughter got her BA degree there remotely.
Oh, shit. I love that.
Tom Loafing says, happy Monday in rugby. The men's Six Nations ended with Wales finishing in 6th place out of 6, losing all 5 of their games. The women's Six Nations is currently underway. Wales lost their opener at home against Scotland. Thank you, Tom, for our rugby update, our rugby correspondent. Stevie Wonder says, as an LSU fan, F. Kim Mulkey. You know she's guilty. Ugly. I almost said. I don't know why. Whoa. You know she's guilty because she didn't wear one of those stupid-ass outfits to the presser. Exactly. Cloaking herself in the LSU athleisure. Kowalski from Nebraska. There's rumors Nebraska might be getting a professional hockey team in the near future. Omaha wants to be a real city. I mean, they should take the damn Coyotes and put them in Nebraska. At least there would be a city that would want them. And the final IM of the day, Dan from Columbus. I can already hear my friends next year complaining about hip drop tackle penalties costing their bets and using it to further claim the NFL is rigged. Seriously, all my friends that sports gamble convince themselves that any call that hurts their odds is an example of rigging. Yeah, Dan, I hate that crap. I mean, everything I see about Patrick Mahomes on social media or on the Chiefs is like, NFL's rigging it in their favor, rigging it in their favor. We heard the same stuff with the Patriots, too. Sometimes people are just better. That's the case. So, oh, by the way, interesting. We talked about this off air, about that Patriots documentary that's going under criticism. We'll touch on that next week.
I did finish it, and so I definitely have some thoughts.
Because is it confirmed that the Crafts are involved in the production of it, and it's making Belichick look really bad?
So I don't know if that's confirmed. It would not surprise me just by virtue of the bent that the documentary takes. It's still very interesting and like a fun watch, but it's absolutely so slanted against Bill Belichick. Like,
yeah,
every single like twist and turn that the Patriots endure over the last like 20 years is absolutely like put squarely in Belichick's lap.
I heard Rodney Harrison and Devin McCourty on NBC complaining that they were interviewed for multiple days, and the only thing that was used was like their criticisms of Bill, and how the whole documentary is basically about Brady and then negatively about Bill. And these guys are like, these players that they had on their team were freaking incredible.
My wife and I were joking because we watched the whole thing and we were like, the main character is honestly Robert Kraft. Right.
So a billionaire creates a hit piece on the guy that like, I don't, it just feels slimy. Well, I got to watch some of it and then I'll come away with my own assessment. But appreciate you all. We will see you on Monday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.